All right, guys, welcome back for the last section of Chapter 1. Today, we're going to be talking about the production's possibilities curve. So, for learning targets today, I'm going to show you guys some production's possibilities curve. I want you to be able to interpret those, understand what the different points on the graph mean, so on and so forth. You should be able to identify how the PPC shows efficiency, growth, and cost. And finally, you should be able to explain why a country's production possibilities depend on the resources and technology available to that economy. All right, so a quick review here of some of the key terms from this section. So I mentioned in the learning targets the production possibilities curve. This is a graph that we're going to look at today that shows the different ways in which a country can use their resources. The production possibilities frontier is essentially the line on that graph that indicates maximum possible output, so the most amounts of goods and services that economy can produce. Efficiency is a use of resources in a way that maximizes output. So using time well, using natural resources and some of those different factors of production well, all of that can lead to increased efficiency, as we talked about in section 1.1. Underutilization is just the opposite of efficiency, where you're not using all of your resources that you're capable of using. And then we'll briefly talk about the law of increasing costs, which is a principle that states that as production shifts from one good or service to another, more and more resources are needed to increase the production of that second good or service. And I have an example for you guys that'll outline this, hopefully in a way that's a little bit easier to understand. All right, so how does a nation decide what and how to produce? This is such a huge question that tons of economists are working on all of the time, but the short answer I'm going to give you is that they use production possibilities curves. They look at the available resources and they help determine the alternative ways that that country or that economy can use those resources in a way that can be efficient and best meet consumer demand. So this is a production possibilities curve. This is a graph rather that economists use to analyze the choices and the trade-offs that people in economies or businesses have to make. So the example that I have on this production possibilities curve, you're always going to be comparing two different goods or services. Here we have guns or butter. We use the term guns or butter in section 1.2. Guns referring to military goods, butter referring to consumer goods. So you can see at point B, if we make a lot of guns, produce a lot of military goods, we're not going to be able to have the resources to produce many consumer goods, and vice versa. The production possibilities curve shows the alternative ways we can use these resources. To draw a curve like this, an economist first begins by deciding which goods or services they're going to examine. So it can be a general category like guns or butter, or it can be really specific. So in this example, I have a graph and a production possibilities curve for you. This asks how many watermelons can Capeland produce if they are making 9 million pairs of shoes. Now we probably don't think of shoes and watermelon as super related topics, but they use a lot of similar resources. One, they're both going to require land, right? For shoes, you're going to need a factory. For watermelon, you're going to need cropland. So both of those occupy physical land. Additionally, they're going to need laborers, right? They're going to need workers. So are you going to allocate your workers to producing shoes or producing watermelon? Right? So on and so forth. So I'll have you answer this question on your own. Please let me know if you find it too challenging or have questions or concerns about it. Please just reach out to me. Okay, so we are going to label this chart. This is filled out for you in your note guide already, but I just want to show you some of the different parts of the production possibilities frontier. So the blue line you have here is the production possibilities frontier. Like I said, that is the line on the graph. So the production possibilities curve is the graph. The frontier is the actual line on that graph. Now, points of efficiency. This economy is using their resources in an efficient manner at points B, D, and C. As you can maybe guess, the point of underutilization is then point A. You'll also see point X. Point X is not possible given the current technology and resources available to this economy. Here we show a growing or a slowing economy. So a country's production possibilities frontier can shift. When the economy is growing, when technology increases, when economies can use their resources more efficiently, we can see a growing economy, which is indicated by the green line here. On the flip side, you can have a slowing economy. You may have a shortage of certain resources, slows down the economy. Right now, we have maybe a shortage of labor, right? That can pull that line back. There's a number of different things that can happen, right? If you have like a natural disaster that ruins your water supply for a while, that's going to have a huge economic impact for the area as well. So those sorts of things can shift the production possibilities frontier to the left, which indicates a slowing economy. Okay, so before we go into cost, I want to cover a few other things here. The production possibilities frontier, which is that line on the graph we were just talking about, is going to indicate the maximum possible output an economy can produce. Each point on that frontier reflects a trade-off. These trade-offs are necessary because the factors of production are scarce. So if you produce at point B, like I mentioned, you're making lots of military goods. Your trade-off is your ability to use those same resources for consumer goods. Using land, labor, and capital to make one product means that fewer resources are left for other products. For efficiency, we talked about this with vocab. The production possibilities frontier represents the economy working at its most efficient level. But sometimes economies work inefficiently and use fewer resources than they're capable of using. We call that underutilization. And then we talked about growth. So when an economy grows, the production possibilities frontier is going to shift to the right because they can produce more at every level. When an economy's production capacity decreases, the economy slows and the curve shifts to the left. So for cost, the production possibilities curve can be used to determine the opportunity costs involved in making an economic decision. Costs increase as production shifts from making one item to another. This is called the law of increasing costs. Briefly here, we're going to take a look at the law of increasing costs. I think this is most easily explained through an example. So we talked about watermelon and shoes, right? In this example, we start with a 50-50 split, right? 50% of your land is used for shoe factories, while the other 50% is used for watermelon. Now we're obviously going to grow the watermelon on the land that is super fertile farmland, And we're going to put the shoe factory on the less desirable land, right? It's like built on gravel. It doesn't matter though, because it's a factory, okay? So in step 2, a decision is made to grow more watermelons. And so we're going to shift more of our land and our resources to growing watermelons. However, we're now growing watermelons on land with rocky soil. And so our efficiency is going to go down because we're not just using that fertile farmland. And then in step 3, the decision is made to grow even more watermelons and shift more resources to farm production. But the added land is less productive overall. A greater amount of that land must be cultivated to get the same increase in output. So shoe output decreases by an even greater amount than it had in step 2, right? Because now we're trying to grow watermelons on land that just really is not cut out for it, right? Land with rocky soil, poor drainage, so on and so forth. So every time they make a decision, the trade-off or the opportunity cost involved becomes more and more severe. That's about all we're going to cover on that. I know there's some other examples in the textbook and whatnot, so if you have any questions on that, please let me know. You're not going to necessarily need to know super specific information, but if you can kind of understand this example, you should be okay. Alright, so the last thing we're going to look at here is technology. So technology can increase a nation's efficiency and therefore can grow the economy because we can use our resources in a more efficient manner, right? For example, people used to kind of just make everything themselves, right? Or they worked in factories where goods were handmade. That's not the case today, right? We have the introduction of the assembly line, and then we have introduction of automation. Those changes in technology have allowed us to make products quicker with less resources, right? So with automation in factories today, there's so much that is just done by machines, by physical capital, that we can actually use our people for other jobs, right? So we've allowed that automation to take over roles that previously had to be filled by laborers, right? And then we can redirect those people elsewhere in the economy, and that allows us to grow. Many governments, for this reason, spend money investing in new technology, in education, and on-the-job training for the workforce, because we know all of these things can make us more efficient and can help grow the economy. All right, that's a wrap for chapter 1. Please let me know if you have questions.